The US will invest well over $1 trillion in AI, artificial intelligence, in the next couple of years alone. It's the transformative technology of our age. But has the US already fallen behind China in the global AI race? And if it has, could that lead to yet another great financial crash? This is the Andrew Neil Report.
Most of the AI companies, the American ones, to go bust.
Wow.
I think maybe 1 in 10 of the companies surviving.
The Chinese are the winners.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily behind the Americans either. I wouldn't like to be an investor in AI right now, let alone somebody who started one of these companies.
欢迎来到胤蓝智库。很多人认为全球 AI 的终局比拼，拼的是华尔街的资本体量，但其实大家低估了这场大国博弈的复杂度。资本狂热的表象之下，美国一路领跑的 AI 科技神话已经撞上了无法突破的物理瓶颈和金融断崖。如今美国豪赌1万亿美金，试图死死守住自身的 AI 霸权，但经济学家史蒂夫·基恩早已指出，美国 AI 体系看似繁华，实则暗藏根深蒂固的深层危机。首先是资本虚火与隐形的债务危机。美国 AI 巨头的估值是中国同行的10倍到25倍，运营成本更是营收的5倍到10倍，长期入不敷出，数千亿资金依靠监管空白的私人信贷暗中输血，撑起了虚假行业的繁荣，和千禧年互联网泡沫破裂前的走势高度相似，系统性风险持续的积累。其次是物理基建的硬性短板，这是更多资金也填补不了的漏洞。美国德州作为核心的算力枢纽，单日 AI 设备冷却水高达上千万加仑，当地建网接入申请早已达到承载峰值的5倍。如今美国 AI 行业陷入了致命困境，空有先进大模型，却没有足够建力和基建支撑落地，有模型无建力成为行业的通病。反观中国，我们走出了完全不同的破局之路，依靠提前布局的800千伏特高压国家电网，我们彻底摆脱了 AI 发展的能源束缚。同时在外部技术封锁的倒逼之下，我们放弃了西方无脑堆算力堆资金的暴力发展模式，深耕算法优化、参数压缩等核心技术，最终仅用 10% 的推理成本就实现了对方 90% 的紧急性能，算力效率实现了跨越式的突破。那么当下火热的 AI 赛道究竟是重塑生产力的技术革命，还是即将破裂的资本泡沫？本期我们就拆解这场 AI 大国的竞赛核心逻辑。
US investment in AI is eye-watering. It propels economic growth in America. It leaves Europe in the dust, but not China. Indeed, US AI stocks are starting to shake a little as the Chinese threat starts to materialize. This month saw the release of K3 from a Chinese company called Moonshot. It's a powerful AI model that's cheaper than many of its US rivals. But China's not all that's worrying AI in America. So this week, the Andrew Neil Report is going to take a deep dive into the challenges facing America's AI revolution: China, debt, and energy. Then speak to Professor Steve Keen of University College London, and a global authority on such matters, to get the measure of the problems. Let's start with China. Perhaps the biggest threat to American AI companies is that they're undercut by cheaper, what you could call commoditized AI from the likes of DeepSeek in China. That would really threaten the implicit pricing models behind today's equity valuations. They wouldn't be able to charge the prices they hope for their services, which are propelling the size of the valuations. Now, if it's true that, for example, DeepSeek V4 can achieve 80 to 90% of the performance of Anthropic's Claude at 10% of the cost, then you can see American AI has a problem. And let's just look at the current valuations. Let's start with China's two biggest. Moonshot AI, that's valued around $31 billion. DeepSeek, that's valued around $71 billion. a lot of money. But look at the two American giants. OpenAI, valued at $852 billion. Anthropic, valued at $965 billion, almost $1 trillion. So this means that US AI firms are currently valued 10 to 25 times more than their Chinese competitors, despite similar capabilities. I think that's what's known as systemic risk. So much for China. Then there's the financing problem. Now, a recent study by Nikkei, the Japanese stock exchange, revealed that 5 US tech giants have hidden off-balance sheet debt of $1.65 trillion, much of it accumulated via what's called private credit. Now, the opaque financing of AI investment by private credit sources, they're not banks, they're not bonds, it's not equity, but various sources of largely unregulated credit, that's a potential threat, not just to the expansion of AI, but to the wider financial system. Now, some fear that the next financial crash will be caused by a meltdown in private credit, bringing AI investment down with it. Now, nobody even knows just how much private credit there is in the AI investment boom, just that there's a lot. Private credit as a source of investment finance has grown since regulations following the great financial crash of 2008. They put greater restrictions on bank lending and other forms of finance. It's essentially private credit a way around these regulations. Even the banks are now lending via private credit vehicles. Private equity and private credit are intimately intertwined. Now, by early 2025, it was reckoned that private credit lending to the technology sector in America stood about $450 billion. That was up $100 billion on the year. It's probably doubled since then as the AI spending boom has gathered speed. Now, one of the risks is that private credit is so deeply embedded in loans to software companies, perhaps as much as $500 billion a year there. And yet these are the very companies thought most at risk from AI, which can develop its own software. So the more private credit invests in AI, the more it might be undermining its previous investments. The global private credit market is now estimated to be over $3 trillion. We don't actually know how much. That's because of the lack of transparency. But it's a lot. And some estimate that outstanding private credit to AI firms will be at least $600 billion by 2030. Now, of course, private credit is only one source of finance fueling the AI boom. Corporate bonds, banks, equity, other sources have put in even more. But the fear is that private credit is the most vulnerable if AI doesn't start generating the revenues that will be needed to service this debt and pay it back. As Nikkei discovered, private credit is most often involved in off-balance sheet joint ventures, special purpose vehicles, and the like, somewhat shadowy financing mechanisms often first to combust when things go wrong, bringing down not just AI, but companies throughout the whole financial system. And what could go wrong other than China? Well, there might not be enough energy to power all these AI data centers springing up, even in energy-rich and energy-cheap North America. Hyperscalers, chip makers, large AI complexes, they now have a valuation at a jaw-dropping $20 trillion. And that is predicated on a quick and massive build-out of AI infrastructure to generate the revenues, to justify the investment, to pay back the debt, service the debt, above all in data center hubs. But the electrical infrastructure needed to sustain these hubs, well, it just isn't there, and it won't be anytime soon. Start with the fact that the US power grid hasn't been upgraded since the 1970s, and it's an immense job to begin now. And the lack of energy isn't actually the primary problem. It's the global bottlenecks of transformers, substations, switchgear, transmission lines needed for that upgrade, plus the acute shortage of skilled labor in the United States to install and run these things. Now, the data center appetite for power and water is insatiable. People don't realize just how much. Let's just take the hub, the data hub at Hays County in Texas. It's a good example. Texas, of course, you don't get more energy rich than that. But that hub can use up to 10 million gallons of water a day for cooling and power generation. And in the process, it's depleting what's known as the Edwards Aquifer, which is essential to the Austin-San Antonio corridor. You can't do both. You can't keep the water running to the people and give AI all the water it needs. Now, this electricity crunch may well be the biggest danger to AI of all. Now to Professor Steve Keen. He keeps an eye on all these matters. He's at University College London. Professor, thank you for joining me. If I can, let me start with China. What is your overview of where we are with this Chinese-American competition in AI?
Well, it's interesting in that what China has done is prepare the ground for something like AI before AI actually came along. So China has rebuilt an enormous energy transmission system throughout the country. We're using 800 volts rather than 400 volts, which has technologically means you have a higher amount of capacity to push energy from one part of the country to another. And what it means is that people in China basically take energy as something which is going to be available almost whatever you do with it. America's still stuck with the old 400 watt system, a volt system. They can't transfer power easily, and therefore they get these energy shortages in places like Texas, as you're explaining. So in some ways, China set the ground for the demands of AI before AI came along. And then a major part of the entrepreneurial side of China's industry, which is massively underestimated by America, has focused on reducing the costs of doing the processing involved in running these AIs. So the basic story is there's enormous amounts of multiplication, matrix mathematics going on to enable these machines or data systems to communicate with you as if you're talking to a human. And the calculations themselves are immensely expensive in terms of energy. You've got some of the models involving, let's say they take 2 trillion parameters. That's 2 trillion numbers that need to be multiplied against each other multiple times to converge on some advice to you on whatever you're looking at, whether that's how to send up your father-in-law in a birthday card or how to solve an unsolved conundrum in mathematics. So the energy needs are enormous. And what the Chinese have done as well is say that this is something which should be open and available to everybody rather than restricted and only available to people who purchase a particular proprietary system. So they're going open source. And that's one of the major challenges of Kimi. You can actually see what the parameters are. You can potentially load it on your own hardware. You don't need a data center necessarily, whereas you do for the American systems. So I think at a global level, it's the Chinese who are set up to win this contest. And of course, that's not at all what the American entrepreneurs who dived into AI thought was going to happen.
Indeed, and it's not what's behind the valuations of AI companies in America either. Yeah. Just before I move on other Chinese issues, just to be clear, it's interesting what you said there, that the kind of energy constraints I was talking about in my monologue that AI in America is about to hit, by and large, you're saying they don't exist in China.
No, that's right. The higher volt, this is again one of the advantages of China being run by engineers rather than economists and lawyers. And I think that's the reason why everybody in the Politburo, not everybody, but the vast majority of engineering backgrounds, they're aware of the advantages of different transmission systems in a way that somebody who's done an economics degree, a PPE course, has no idea. And then they'd say, well, we need energy for an advanced economy. How do we distribute the energy more easily? We need to go to higher voltage, and that's what they've been doing. So the energy has been built there as almost a matter of course. And then when you talk to Chinese entrepreneurs, they don't worry about the availability of energy. Water is a different story, but they don't worry about the availability of energy. So that combination, having the available energy to start with, and then producing systems which don't need the same amount of energy in terms of data centers, gives the Chinese an enormous advantage. And the Americans, I think that you're finding out what happens when you have a centrally planned versus a non-centrally planned system. And in this case, the central planning means the energy is already available, where it's not there for the disaggregated American system.
In general, is it true to say that although the American AI systems may be more sophisticated, that the Chinese AI models are much cheaper and have 85–90% of the capacity of the most sophisticated American models? So if you if you combine cost with capacity and capability, the Chinese are the winners.
Yeah, and that's it. They're not necessarily behind the Americans either. There's a lot of extremely clever engineers. Often did their PhDs in America and went back to China. They're outstanding intellects, and a lot of it is how do you manage to do these matrix mathematics more efficiently? How can you cut down the load? Where do you get points where there's overkill versus where you can stop and get most of the answers you need? And therefore, if you do that, you get more time to actually train the results, and you get higher quality results. So the Chinese have out-innovated the Americans. In some ways, the Americans have done what they seem to do as a species. That is, they use brute force to overwhelm the rest of the world. The Chinese have used intelligence rather than brute force this time round.
So what is the likely American response to be? I know that the Trump administration has tried to limit the export of some of the most sophisticated chips to China. Chips which China, at the most sophisticated level, does not produce itself. It does need these imports. But am I right in thinking that nothing America has really done to try and dampen the Chinese AI projects has had much of an impact?
No, in fact, in some ways, it spurred the Chinese to innovate more. So, for example, the bans on chips means not being able to get machinery from AMSL to build chips in their own country, whereas they sell those to Taiwan and then they've on-sold to America. This has forced the Chinese to innovate different ways to produce very low micron chips to give enormous amounts of processing power in small bundles. So the bans have actually encouraged innovation by the Chinese. And I think in some ways, this has got a historical parallel because every Chinese school student learns of the Opium Wars, learns that they were effectively raped by the West, that they can't rely upon, they can't trust the West. And so anything like putting up a barrier saying you can't have this technology actually inspires the Chinese to say, we'll replace it ourselves and become self-sufficient, because our mistake in the previous times was to lose our self-sufficiency against the West.
Reuters has been reporting this week that talks are to begin between China and America on AI, the American side to be left by the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Is that likely to lead to anything, or is continued competition between the two superpowers of AI just likely to continue?
I doubt it, because with the Chinese, and the EFC even made a speech on this front just recently, they want it to be open source. They want this stuff to be publicly available, effectively treat AI as a public utility, not as a source of private profit. Now, when you do private profit, you make everything proprietary. You try to restrict what's available, and that's what the Americans have done. You mentioned the railways boom beforehand, a typical boom and bust cycle in capitalism, which Schumpeter explained extremely well. All the firms go in thinking they're going to be the dominant party, so you get massive overinvestment. The overinvestment extends the technology through a whole of society. When the technology comes out, it starts undercutting and destroying other previous sectors. So, of course, railways destroyed carriages in that sense. And then the technology permeates society when the bust occurs. Now, I think we're close to that point. It will permeate through society after a bust occurs. But the scale of that financial bubble, as you were saying, in America is absolutely enormous. So these Americans are in a desperate situation. Their costs are sometimes 10 times their revenue. They're running up massive losses. They think we've got to make sure that we get the revenue that's going to come out of this when the crash occurs. I think they're seeing the inevitability of a drop in the price of tokens coming up at some point. So they're trying to make it proprietary. And in that sense, what you've got is the Chinese are voting for making this open and available to everybody. The Americans are trying to restrict it for their own benefit. The Chinese can just keep on going. They don't have to cooperate. So I think ultimately the only resolution for this is the one the Chinese want, where AI becomes a public utility provided to everybody, and it's open access rather than restricted and privatized.
See things going in the next couple of years with AI into the next decade, let's say, given the China-American dynamic that you've just outlined for us?
Yeah, well, I expect most of the AI companies, the American ones, to go bust because the difference between their revenue and their cost is huge. 5 to 10 times, cost being 5 to 10 times revenue. Remember the internet bubble. You and I obviously lived through that one. And you remember pets.com? And I think it was valued at more than the the entire pet industry in America. Amazon was valued at more than the transportation, the airline systems. Evaluations get crazy and then they crash after the putting in the technology transforms society, but doesn't lead the profit that the initial people who rush in expect. So we're getting that on steroids this time round, and we will see, I think, maybe 1 in 10 of the companies surviving. But the wild card, as we're discussing now, is that there's another country that's in this game in a way that America hasn't experienced before. So when the telecommunications bubble or the internet bubble occurred, it was exclusively American technology doing it. This time round, they've done it, they've overinvested, they've overborrowed, they're levered, they're going to crash, and on top of that.
这场博弈的本质是3套核心发展范式的深度对决。第一是资本收割与普惠生态。美国 AI 巨头依靠技术壁垒构建其垄断，通过高额的收费赚取利润，用封锁的商业模式填补自身的债务窟窿。而国内 Jeep、K-me 等企业主打开源开放、高性价比，将高端 AI 技术平民化、普惠化，在性能持平、成本相差数十倍的前提下，封闭逐利的商业模式远比技术落后更容易被市场淘汰。第二，碎片化基建与国家工程。 AI 发展的终极比拼是能源。中国搭建起全域调度的特高压公共建网，完美适配 AI 模式的发展需求，而美国沿用70年代的碎片化老旧建网。资本可以无限扩张，但物理基建上限无法突破，无序发展最终只会触景情志。第三，技术封锁与自主进化。美国的芯片制裁与技术围堵非但没有扼杀中国的 AI 产业，反而倒逼我们完成技术的突变。我们摒弃粗放的算力堆叠模式，深耕几层算法与数学逻辑，在硬件受限的劣势下，打磨出极致的算法效率与强大的算法韧性。纵观工业革命发展史，能决定颠覆性技术未来的，从来不是资本市场堆砌的泡沫，而是谁能以更低能耗、更高工程效率将技术转化为全民共享的社会生产力。这场长线的 AI 博弈的争局，到底是华尔街资本估值胜出，还是靠实打实的能源基建工程实力胜出呢？欢迎大家在评论区留下你的深度见解。这里是胤蓝智库，我们下期见。